In the videos on ethics, we saw that ethics is based on reason applied to experience, and that ethical principles serve the two facets of the relational duality, namely interdependence and intimacy, mutual need and mutual meaning. As to the intimacy facet, we saw that meaning in life is found in relations to other people. But we didn't say how we obtain meaning. In this video, we'll see how we obtain meaning in life. Let's start with an example. Suppose that you discover someone in need, you give them $1 and they thank you profusely, so much so that you feel embarrassed. Why do you feel embarrassed? I invite you to pause the video on the next slide and answer the question. Let's further suppose that you discover someone else in need, you give them $10,000, and they take it without the least expression of gratitude. How will you feel, and why will you feel this way? Again, I invite you to pause the video on the next slide and answer the question. To take a third example, suppose that you're a parent, you drive your teenager to a friend's house who lives 5 minutes away, and they thank you profusely. But suppose that on another occasion you devote an entire day to traveling to and attending a competition in which they are participating, and they don't thank you at all. How will you feel in each case, and why? Again, I invite you to pause the video on the next slide and answer the question. These examples show that meaning in life comes from the exertion of effort. The more effort we expend, the greater the meaning. Intuitively, we could probably say that the meaning we achieve is proportional to the amount of effort we expend. But we should keep in mind that other factors play a role as well, the most important of which is the consequence of our action. What is of interest to us at this point is the observation that the meaning in life comes from the exertion of effort or the exercise of willpower. The more effort, the greater the meaning. We are now in a position to solve one of the most important problems about human life that Western religion attempts to solve, namely, to explain why there is suffering and death. That is, to explain why humans are mortal. As you no doubt know, in Genesis 3 the answer is given that mankind sinned and was cursed by God. Is this the reason that humans are mortal? We can prove otherwise. Since the exertion of effort is necessary for meaning, if God created humans, it goes without saying that He wanted to create for them a meaningful life. So He had to give them the feature of willpower, the ability to exert effort. I invite you to pause on the next slide and explain why the exertion of effort is the basic reason for mortality. But if you'd like a hint, just keep playing the video. Here's the hint. The exertion of effort entails the expenditure of some resource, which we'll call energy. So what will happen if you exert so much effort that you completely exhaust your energy supply? I invite you to pause the video on the next slide and answer the question. What will happen if you exert so much effort that you completely exhaust your energy supply? You'll die. Now, the proof that willpower implies mortality is more complex than what I've explained here. I give you a feel for it on my website under the topic of proofs, but you'll have to read my book to get the whole story. This is a fascinating result because it solves the age-old problem of explaining why, if there is a beneficent God, humans are subject to suffering and death. A long-standing claim of atheists is that the suffering and death of humans is incompatible with the idea that there is a beneficent God. But I've shown that if a beneficent God created humans, He would give them the feature of willpower in order to provide a meaningful life, and willpower in turn implies the possibility of suffering and death. Hence, under the assumption that a beneficent God created humans, we draw the conclusion that humans will be subject to suffering and death. Okay, so we're subject to suffering and death. We're mortal, we must struggle to survive. This is the result of the feature of willpower, which makes it possible for us to exert effort, and the exertion of effort in turn makes it possible for us to achieve meaning in life. Now, what do we do to achieve that meaning? We know from the ethics videos that we obtain meaning in our relations with other people, so the question is, what do we do in our relations with other people in order to exert effort, in order to obtain meaning. I invite you to pause the video on the next slide and answer the question. And as a hint, I refer you back to the examples that I gave at the beginning of this video. What we do for meaning is that we help other people survive as we ourselves seek to survive. The meaning comes from our exertion of effort in helping other people survive as we exert effort in trying to keep ourselves alive. What this entails is a balancing activity, balancing egoism and altruism. And I refer to the trade-off between egoism and altruism as the meaning trade-off. Notice that our mortality provides the context by which we can obtain meaning through the meaning trade-off, because in helping someone else survive, we must expend resources from our finite pool of resources that we have acquired to enhance our own survival. If we take altruism too far, we won't pursue egoism sufficiently, and we will accordingly either die or else become a burden on other people. So each person must pursue egoism to a sufficient extent to avoid becoming a burden on other people. At the other extreme, if we take egoism too far, we won't pursue altruism sufficiently, and we will suffer from deficient meaning. When we enter the world as a newborn baby, we are completely egoistic, a disposition that is necessary for our survival at that stage of our life, since our knowledge and skills are minimal. Can you imagine what would happen if a mother had to teach her newborn baby to eat and drink? The baby is too immature to learn such concepts, so the baby would die. As we mature, we gain knowledge and skills, and we learn from our parents to be altruistic. As we proceed through life as adults, accordingly, this is what life is essentially about: realizing the meaning trade-off by balancing egoism and altruism in the context of human mortality. In pursuing this activity, the challenge for most of us is normally to try to be more altruistic. So I wish to close with a parable of Jesus, which is one of the most beautiful and inspiring parables ever told. I'll present the parable in part 2.